When I discovered my wife's darkest secret, my entire world collapsed. But what I found next left me shattered beyond repair. This is the story of how I fought to reclaim my life after betrayal. The morning was like any other. The sun had barely risen, and I was still in that sleepy haze, trying to shake off the fatigue from a long week at work. But little did I know, that quiet morning would soon become the beginning of my worst nightmare. I remember walking into the kitchen, groggy, still in my pajamas, and grabbing a cup of coffee. I was thinking about the usual things: work, kids, bills. But then, as I reached for the sugar, I noticed something strange. My wife's phone was lying face up on the counter. Normally, she never left her phone around like that. She was always glued to it, taking it with her wherever she went. My heart skipped a beat. It was odd. Something was off. I picked it up, just to put it back where it belonged, but something caught my eye. The screen lit up, showing a message notification from a name I didn't recognize. It was a simple text: "I can't wait to see you tonight." My heart froze. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Why was my wife getting texts like this from someone I didn't know? I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe just a friend or a work colleague. But the feeling in my gut was telling me something different. Something was wrong. The text wasn't the only thing on her phone. As I swiped, more messages appeared, each one worse than the last. Flirty, suggestive words exchanged between her and this mysterious person. I felt a wave of anger, confusion, and hurt all at once. How could she do this to me? To us? We had a life together, a family. We had built everything on trust. But there was more. As I scrolled down, I found pictures. Not just any pictures, but intimate photos of her and someone else. The person's face wasn't visible in the photos, but I didn't need to see their face to know what was happening. My wife, my beautiful wife, had been hiding this from me for who knows how long. I felt like the world had just dropped out from under me. I had no words, just a pit in my stomach. I couldn't breathe. I never thought this would happen. Not to us. Not to me. I quickly put the phone down, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My heart was racing. My mind was screaming at me to do something. Confront her, yell, fight. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. I had to know more. I had to find out the truth. I had to uncover the full extent of her betrayal before I did anything rash. The sound of footsteps behind me made me freeze. I turned around, my wife standing there, looking at me with a strange expression on her face. She saw the phone on the counter. She knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm, almost too calm. It was like she knew. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was still trying to process everything. The text, the pictures, the betrayal. I was suffocating in the pain of it all. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I was going to make her regret every second of what she did to me. The game had changed, and I was ready to fight back. But as I looked at her, I knew this was only the beginning. What I did next would change everything. Before everything fell apart, before the texts, the pictures, and the betrayal, we had what I thought was a perfect life. We met when we were both young, full of dreams, and with hearts wide open. She was everything I wanted: beautiful, smart, funny. She made me feel like I could conquer the world. When we got married, it felt like the beginning of something magical. A fresh start, a lifelong journey. We moved into a small house just outside the city, and slowly we built a life together. The kind of life that people dreamed about. I worked long hours at my job, but I was always there for her, for us. She was a stay-at-home mom, taking care of our 2 kids, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. I can still remember the day we found out we were having our second child. We were sitting in the doctor's office, holding hands, excited, laughing about what the baby would be like. She had that smile that could light up any room, and I loved how she looked at me, full of trust and warmth. I thought nothing could break us. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It wasn't a sudden shift, but it was there, lurking just beneath the surface. I started noticing the small things. The way she would pull away when I tried to hug her. The late nights at work, or when she'd tell me she was going out with friends, only to come back hours later without a word of where she'd been. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Everyone goes through rough patches. We had young kids, financial stress, the usual life struggles. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't want to believe it. The love we had was too strong, or so I thought. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. She had always been my best friend, my partner in everything. The thought that she could be hiding something from me, especially something this big, was impossible to comprehend. Still, I pushed it out of my mind. I worked harder, tried to be more present, and hoped things would go back to normal. But the distance between us kept growing. I could feel it, and I hated it. The kids noticed too, though in their own way. They would ask why Mommy wasn't around as much or why she seemed so tired all the time. It hurt to see them struggle with the changes, and I tried my best to keep things normal for them. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, and I feared the worst. It wasn't until recently that I started hearing whispers from my friends. At first, it was just small things. A comment here and there. "Is everything okay at home?" They'd ask, their voices filled with concern. Then, one day, a close friend of mine pulled me aside. "Man, I've seen your wife with someone else. She's been acting strange. I think you should be careful." I didn't want to hear it. I brushed it off. But the seed of doubt was planted. I kept telling myself it wasn't true. Maybe they were just mistaken, or maybe they were seeing things that weren't there. But deep down, I felt the truth starting to sink in. I had been blind, ignoring the signs, too afraid to admit that the woman I loved might be hiding something from me. And now, I had the phone. The evidence was right in front of me, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Everything I thought I knew about our life together, about her, about us, was unraveling. I wanted to believe that my friend was wrong. But what I had seen on that phone left no room for doubt. And now, I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I could barely sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those messages, the pictures, the hints of something I couldn't yet fully understand. I kept replaying the moments in my mind, searching for signs, for something, anything, that would explain why this was happening. I couldn't make sense of it. But the next few days didn't make it any easier. The first clue I noticed after the discovery wasn't anything big, but looking back, it was like a sign I had ignored for too long. My wife's behavior had been changing in small but noticeable ways. She had started going out more often, telling me she was meeting friends or doing errands. She'd always been a homebody, someone who preferred staying in with the family. Now, she was leaving at odd times, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. The kids were asking more questions. "Why is Mommy always leaving?" my youngest son would ask. His little face, confused and sad, made my heart ache. He didn't know the truth. He shouldn't have to. But I knew. And it hurt like nothing else to see how it was already affecting them. When she came home, she'd act normal, like nothing was wrong. She'd smile, kiss the kids, ask about my day. But there was something cold in her eyes. It wasn't the warmth I used to see. It was like she was pretending to be someone else. Someone I didn't know. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on work, on the kids, but my mind was always on her. It was like I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was wrong. And the more I looked, the more I started to notice even smaller details. For one, her phone became glued to her hand. She never let it out of sight. She used to leave it around the house, on the kitchen counter or the coffee table, but now it was always with her. Even when she went to the bathroom, she'd take it with her. If I tried to look at her screen, she'd quickly turn it away or lock it. I tried to confront her once, asking if everything was okay. I didn't want to accuse her, not yet. But the way she reacted made my stomach drop. She immediately got defensive. "Why are you asking me that?" she snapped, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it before. It was like she was trying to hide something. But it wasn't just the phone or the late nights. It was the way she looked at me sometimes. Like she was guilty, but didn't want to admit it. And when I tried to bring up any of my concerns, she'd dismiss them with a quick, "You're overthinking things," or "You've been stressed lately." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining it. There was more going on. One evening, I was sitting in the living room, flipping through some old photos of us. The kids were playing in the background, laughing, and I almost felt like everything could go back to how it was. But then I heard a sound, footsteps coming from the kitchen. I glanced up, and there she was, on her phone again, staring at it like she was reading something important. The phone buzzed, and she quickly shoved it into her pocket, almost like she was trying to hide it from me. My heart raced. What was she hiding now? Why was she so secretive? That night, after the kids went to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was really going on. I waited until she was asleep, and then, without thinking, I grabbed her phone. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know the truth. And when I opened her messages again, I found more of the same, texts from him. More flirtation. More promises. More lies. It wasn't just a few texts or random moments. It was a pattern. A pattern of betrayal. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. I had ignored all the signs, all the little pieces that were right in front of me. But now, the truth was clear, and it was uglier than I ever could have imagined. I stood there, holding her phone, knowing I couldn't go back. This wasn't just about my wife anymore. This was about my life, my family. And I was done being in the dark. I couldn't put the phone down. I sat there in the dim light of the bedroom, reading every single message again and again. The more I read, the more my anger grew, but so did my confusion. I needed answers. Why was she doing this? How long had this been going on? Was there more that I didn't know? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything else. The only thing on my mind was her betrayal. How could she look at me, smile at me, kiss me, knowing what she was doing behind my back? I felt like a fool. A complete fool. The next morning, I tried to act normal. The kids were up early, running around the house, and I forced myself to smile at them, to pretend everything was fine. But my mind was elsewhere. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies. I saw the woman who had promised to love me forever, and now I could barely recognize her. She kissed me goodbye before she left for the day, just like any other day. I didn't kiss her back. I didn't even look her in the eyes. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to confront her, but I needed more proof. I couldn't just accuse her without knowing for sure. But what if I already knew enough? What if all the signs were right in front of me? I had already seen enough to know something was seriously wrong. But the idea of her lying to me for so long, it was like a weight on my chest I couldn't shake. I spent the day trying to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every call, every email, every task felt like it was a million miles away. My thoughts kept drifting back to her, to him, to the affair. The whole thing was eating me alive, and I couldn't escape it. I started piecing things together. I thought about all the little moments I had ignored in the past. Her secretive behavior, the late nights, the sudden trips out of town. It wasn't just the phone anymore. It was everything. Then, I remembered something, a conversation she'd had with her friend a few months ago. It was just a casual chat, or so I thought. But when I really thought about it, the word she said took on a different meaning. "I'm just not sure anymore," she had told her friend, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I'm happy. I don't know if I'm still in love with him." At the time, I brushed it off. I thought she was just venting, caught up in the stress of everyday life. But now, I realized that it was more than that. She had been planning this. Maybe even before I suspected anything. I couldn't sit around and wait any longer. I had to find out who this person was. I had to know the full extent of the betrayal. I started by tracing the number that kept showing up on her phone. His name still wasn't in her contacts. It took some effort, some sneaky moves I wasn't proud of, but eventually, I found it. His name was Josh. Josh. The name meant nothing to me, but it felt like a knife in my gut. Was this who she had been hiding from me? Was this the man she was seeing behind my back? I searched online, trying to dig up more about him. I found his social media page, and that's when the pieces really started to fall into place. He wasn't some random stranger. He was a close friend. Someone who had been around for years. A man I had trusted. A man who had sat at my dinner table, laughed with me, shared drinks, and told me about his life. I never once suspected that he was the one she had been sneaking around with. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My best friend, my own circle, had betrayed me, and I had no idea. It was like the world I thought I knew was crumbling around me, and I couldn't stop it. Every part of me screamed to confront her immediately, to throw it all in her face and demand answers. But a part of me held back, knowing that I needed more. I couldn't let my emotions control me. I had to be smart. But the more I thought about it, the more the anger grew. This man, this friend of mine, had been in my life for years. And now, he was sleeping with my wife, destroying everything I had worked for. And what made it worse, he was a coward, hiding behind lies while I was left to piece together the truth. I could feel the tension rising inside me. It was like a storm building, waiting to explode. I was on the edge. I had already made up my mind. I would confront her. But when? How? I had to be ready. And when the moment came, she wouldn't see it coming. I had the truth now. But I couldn't just walk up to her and say it. Not yet. I had a plan, and when I confronted her, it would be in a way she would never forget. The air felt heavy as the days passed. I could feel it, like a storm was brewing inside of me, ready to break. My heart was twisted between anger, heartbreak, and betrayal. But the worst part, it was the unknown. I needed to see her face, to hear her explain herself, or at least try to. The plan I had been building in my head had taken shape. I couldn't just blindly trust her anymore. I had to confront her with everything I knew, make her see the truth, and let her know that I wasn't as blind as she thought I was. It was a Saturday night, and she was out with friends again. Just like before. The same excuses. The same lies. It made me sick, but I had to wait for the perfect moment. I didn't want to do this with the kids around. I wanted to have her all to myself, where she couldn't escape, where I could show her that I had the power now. When she came home that night, her smile was the same. It was like she thought everything was fine. She didn't know that I knew what she had been doing. She didn't know that I had been sitting here, piecing everything together. Watching her, waiting for this moment. I stood up when she walked through the door, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked surprised to see me standing there, but she didn't say anything at first. Her eyes flickered to my face, trying to read me, but I didn't let her. I wasn't the same man anymore. "I thought you were working late tonight," she said, almost casually. "I was," I replied coldly. "But I had something more important to take care of." Her expression flickered. She must have sensed the change in my tone, but she still tried to brush it off. She walked past me, her purse slung over her shoulder, but I didn't let her get away. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice firm, demanding an answer. She froze, a look of confusion crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" "I was out with Jessica and Sarah." I didn't believe her, not for a second. "I don't care who you were with," I said, my voice rising. "What I care about is what you've been doing. All these lies. All this hiding. How long did you think you could keep it from me? How long did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her face drained of color. For a moment, she didn't say anything. But then, she tried to laugh it off. "You're overreacting. What are you even talking about?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The anger was bubbling beneath the surface, but I couldn't lose control. I had to show her that I was in charge of this moment. "I'm talking about you and Josh," I said, the words slipping from my mouth like acid. "I'm talking about the messages, the late nights, the secrets you've been keeping. You can deny it all you want, but the truth is right there, staring you in the face." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a brief moment, I saw fear in them. But then, she quickly masked it with anger. "You've been snooping? You've been going through my phone? That's low. You don't trust me, and now you're accusing me of things I would never do." I stepped forward, my chest tightening with the pressure of the situation. "You don't get to turn this on me. You've been lying to my face for months. You've been sneaking around with him, betraying me, and now you're telling me that I'm the problem? That I'm the one who's wrong?" Her face twisted with frustration, and she started pacing the room. "It's not like that. You don't understand. It's complicated, okay? I didn't want to hurt you, but things have changed between us." Changed? I almost couldn't believe my ears. "How long have you been changing behind my back, while I'm here, trusting you? How long have you been seeing him? Tell me the truth right now." For a long moment, she stayed silent, her face a mixture of guilt and anger. I could see her struggling, like she didn't know how to defend herself. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I needed her to realize that everything she had worked to hide from me had crumbled in an instant. Finally, her voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "I didn't want this. I never wanted to hurt you. But you stopped seeing me. You were always busy, always focused on work, always distant. I felt like I was invisible." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the wave of hurt and anger. "So, instead of talking to me, instead of coming to me for help, you decided to sleep with someone else? You decided to tear apart everything we built." She stepped closer, her eyes filled with tears now, but the damage was done. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." It was too late for apologies. Too late for excuses. "You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand," I said, my voice cold. "And now I'm done. I'm done with the lies. Done with the secrets. Done with all of it." Her face crumpled, and I could see the regret in her eyes. But it didn't matter. It was too late for us. I was done. But even as the truth was out, and her apologies echoed in the room, something inside me shifted. There was more to this than just her betrayal. And the next step of my plan was something she would never see coming. I thought I had everything figured out. The betrayal. The lies. The man who had wormed his way into my life, taken my wife, my trust, and my happiness. But as I stood there, facing her, watching her cry, begging for forgiveness, it felt like everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. For a moment, I actually felt pity for her. My heart, though broken, ached for the woman I had loved for so long. But that fleeting moment of weakness quickly passed. The truth was undeniable now. And yet, something didn't sit right. There was still a nagging feeling deep in my chest. I had all the evidence. The messages. The phone calls. The lies. And yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. Something I was still missing. "Look, I know I've hurt you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But it wasn't just about him. It was about us. About everything we've lost." I didn't answer her. I just stared at her, trying to process it all. She was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it without thinking, and what I saw made my stomach drop. It was a text from Josh. "Meet me tonight. I need to tell you something important." My blood ran cold. I didn't want to believe it, but the timing felt too perfect. Too convenient. I stared at the message, my fingers gripping the phone tightly, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice suddenly tight with panic. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I hit the call button. The phone rang, and I didn't care that she was staring at me, her face a mix of worry and confusion. I needed to know. I needed to hear it from him. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Hey man," Josh said casually, like nothing was wrong. "You get my message?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at my wife, who was now watching me with wide eyes. She was starting to piece it together. I got it, I finally replied, my voice low. What do you need to tell me? There was a pause on the other end, and then he spoke again, but this time his voice was different. It was tense. I can't keep doing this, man. I don't know what's going on between you and Sarah, but there's something I need to come clean about. I don't think I can hide it anymore. My heart pounded in my chest. What do you mean, come clean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was anything but calm. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I never thought it would go this far. But there's something you don't know. Something you need to hear from me. I glanced at Sarah, who was now standing frozen, her face pale, her lips trembling. She was shaking her head, trying to tell me to hang up, to walk away, but I couldn't. I had to hear it. I needed to know everything. You're not the only one who's been lied to, Josh continued, his voice now urgent. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but it's time. Sarah, she's been hiding something from both of us. There's something you don't know, something bigger than what you think. My head was spinning. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice growing louder. Sarah, she's pregnant, he said, each word sending a shockwave through my body. And it's not yours. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The world around me blurred. I stared at Sarah, who was now trembling, her eyes filled with fear and guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth was finally out. She had been hiding this from me all along. Pregnant. With his child. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. She hadn't just slept with him, she had gotten pregnant by him. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken life. I stood there in silence for a moment, trying to process what Josh had just told me. The weight of it all was unbearable. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had, was a lie. I'm sorry, man, Josh said, his voice now filled with regret. I never wanted it to go this far. But it's the truth. And you deserve to know. I hung up without saying another word. My hands were shaking as I turned to Sarah, who was now looking at me like she was about to break down completely. I had all the answers now. The truth was out, and I could see the cracks in everything we had built. But there was one more thing. One more thing I needed to know before I made my move. I stepped forward, my voice calm but full of fury. How long has it been going on? How long have you been lying to me? As the words left my mouth, I watched her face crumble. The full weight of the truth was finally hitting her, and I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal really went. And when I did, it would change everything. The room was thick with silence after Josh's call ended. The truth, the ugly, painful truth, was now clear. I could see the guilt and fear in Sarah's eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. Not after everything she'd done. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. What could she say? What could she say to fix this? To fix us? You lied to me, I said, my voice quiet, but there was a coldness to it that made her flinch. You've been lying to me for months. You've been hiding this from me. From us. She stepped back, her hands trembling. I never wanted this to happen, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I didn't yell, but the words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. You did it anyway. And you kept lying to my face, pretending like everything was fine while you were out with him, while you were carrying his child. The reality of the situation hit me harder than I expected. She was pregnant. With Josh's baby. A part of me wanted to break down, to feel sorry for myself, but I couldn't. I couldn't let her see that weakness, that vulnerability anymore. I had to take control of this situation. I didn't want to hurt you, she repeated, tears in her eyes now, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. I turned away from her, pacing the room. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, threatening to explode. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we built? But then, the anger shifted. I knew what I had to do. You think you can get away with this? I asked, more to myself than to her. My eyes burned with fury. You think you can destroy everything we had and just walk away? Sarah stood frozen, looking helpless. Please. I'm sorry. I never meant to. I raised my hand, stopping her before she could finish. I wasn't listening anymore. I wasn't going to listen to her apologies or her excuses. This wasn't about that anymore. This was about something bigger than her. It was about showing her, showing everyone, that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. The next step of my plan was clear, and I wasn't going to waste any more time. Sarah watched me, but she didn't stop me. She knew what was coming, and she couldn't stop it. I dialed a number, my fingers trembling with the adrenaline coursing through me. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Hey, it's me, I said, trying to steady my voice. I need your help with something. The voice on the other end responded quickly, eager. Of course. What's going on? I want to make sure everyone knows the truth. About Sarah. About her affair. I want to expose everything. There was a brief pause. Are you sure about this? It's going to hurt a lot of people. I don't care, I replied, my voice firm now. She destroyed everything. I want the world to know who she really is. I want Josh to know he's not the only one who needs to face the consequences. It's time everyone knew what she's been hiding. I could hear the person on the other end nodding. Got it. We'll take care of it. I hung up the phone, my hands still shaking. I could feel a strange sense of power growing inside me. This was it. This was my revenge. And there was no turning back. I turned back to Sarah, who was now sitting on the couch, her hands in her lap, staring at the floor. She didn't look at me. She didn't have the strength to. I walked over to her slowly, my footsteps heavy in the silence. When I reached her, I didn't sit down. I stood over her, looking down at her with a mixture of anger and something darker, something more calculated. I want you to understand something, I said coldly. What you did to me, it's unforgivable. I can't just let it go. I'm going to make sure you never forget this. Her head snapped up, her face pale and panicked. What do you mean? What are you going to do? I didn't answer her. Instead, I pulled out my phone again, and I scrolled through the messages between Sarah and Josh. Messages I had been saving for this moment. Messages that would expose their affair for everyone to see. You think you've gotten away with this? You haven't, I said as I selected the images and texts I had saved. You'll be the one to feel the shame now. Without another word, I started sending the screenshots and texts to a group chat with some of our closest friends, people we had trusted for years. The ones who had no idea what was really going on behind closed doors. The moment I hit send, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. There was no turning back now. I watched Sarah as her face went from confused to horrified, her hands trembling as she looked at the phone in her hand. She tried to snatch it from me, but I was faster. You can't do this, she begged, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to us. But it was too late. The messages were already out there. The truth was exposed. And I was done being the victim. Done being the fool. As I watched her collapse on the couch, sobbing, something inside of me shifted. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. She had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we had. Not without consequences. Not without everyone knowing what she had done. As I walked out of the room, leaving her to face the fallout, I couldn't help but wonder, was this enough? Was this truly the end, or had I just opened a door that would lead to even more devastating truths? I had done it. The messages were sent. The truth was out there for everyone to see. There was no going back. No undoing what had been done. I walked out of the house, feeling the weight of what I had just done pressing down on me. The anger that had been fueling me moments ago started to fade, replaced by a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had exposed her, humiliated her, and in some way, I knew I had crossed a line. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out to see multiple notifications, messages from friends, texts from family. The pictures, the screenshots, everything had spread quickly. The group chat I had sent it to had already forwarded the messages to others. And now everyone knew. I read through the messages as I stood outside, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over me. Some of the people who had always been on Sarah's side, who had trusted her, were now questioning everything they knew about her. Some of them were even angry with her, calling her out for the betrayal. It was exactly what I wanted, but the feeling that came with it was not what I expected. As I scrolled through the messages, I saw one from Josh. He had texted me, and I could feel my blood boiling as I read it. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you, man. But I can't hide anymore. I never meant for things to go this far, but Sarah, she's not the woman you think she is. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice in my head that was screaming for me to go back, to fix this, to somehow make it right. But I couldn't. I couldn't undo what had already been done. I had exposed Sarah's affair, and now there was no way for her to hide from the truth. The people who had once believed in her were now questioning everything. But what about me? What did I have left? I walked around for hours, trying to clear my head, but I couldn't escape the guilt. It was eating away at me, and the realization hit hard. I had sought revenge, but in doing so, I had lost myself. As the sun began to set, I knew I had to face her again. The damage was done. Now, I had to deal with the aftermath. When I walked back into the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her head buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment. There was no anger left in me. Just sorrow. I had gotten what I wanted, but I didn't know how to feel about it now. Sarah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and shame. Her eyes were red, her body shaking. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I didn't want this, she finally whispered, her voice broken. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to destroy everything we had. But I couldn't stop myself. You should have stopped, I replied, my voice steady but cold. You should have thought about the consequences before you got involved with him. Before you lied to me, over and over again. She nodded, her head dropping again, her shoulders heaving with the weight of her sobs. I felt a small part of me want to comfort her, to take away her pain, but I couldn't. Not now. Not after everything. I can't take this back, she said quietly. I can't undo what I've done. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The words felt hollow to me. The apology felt empty. She had said sorry countless times before, but those words never seemed to mean anything. How could they now? How could anything be fixed after all the lies? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment where I had the power, the control. The moment where I could feel like I had one. But all I felt was exhausted. I know, I said quietly. I know. We sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't peaceful. It was a silence filled with regret, with questions that could never be answered, with a bond that had been broken beyond repair. Finally, I spoke again. You should go. You need to figure things out. You can't stay here after everything. I can't live with you, not after what you've done. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I stood my ground. I couldn't let her stay. Not after what she had done. Not after everything I had lost. I'll leave, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I want you to know. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted it to go this far. But it had. It had gone too far. And there was no turning back. As she packed her things and walked out of the house, I stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. I had gotten my revenge. I had exposed the affair. But it wasn't a victory. It wasn't a triumph. It was just the end. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I would ever trust again. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone make a fool of me again. The silence in the house was deafening, but it was also a relief. The truth was out. The betrayal was exposed. And now, I had to find a way to move on. The days after Sarah left felt like a blur. At first, I couldn't tell if I was breathing or just existing. The house, once filled with laughter and the sound of her voice, was now silent. The emptiness echoed through the walls, louder than any words could ever be. I spent hours just sitting in the living room, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my mind around everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the affair, it all felt so unreal. But it was real. And now, all I had left was the cold truth. At first, I felt nothing but anger. But over time, that anger began to fade. It wasn't that I had forgiven Sarah. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't even that I was okay with what had happened. But something inside me shifted. I started to realize that I had been holding on to this pain for too long. I had been holding on to the idea of revenge, thinking that it would make me feel better, but it didn't. It didn't change what happened, and it didn't heal the wounds. I began to accept that I couldn't control everything. I couldn't control what Sarah did, and I couldn't undo the hurt. But what I could do was control how I moved forward. I started small, cleaning out the mess that had built up over the years. There were clothes in the closet I didn't need, old reminders I couldn't bear to look at. I threw it all away, piece by piece, until the house felt less like a place full of memories and more like a space where I could rebuild. One evening, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, making dinner for the first time in weeks. The silence was still there, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint a new picture of my life. I looked at the empty seat across the table, where Sarah used to sit. There were so many things I had wanted to say to her, but in the end, it didn't matter. The truth had been exposed, and there was no going back to what we had. That part of my life was over. And as hard as it was to admit, I knew it was for the best. I had been living in a shadow, in a lie, for so long. But now, the sun was shining again. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be days when I felt weak. But I was learning to be strong again. I was learning to let go. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from my friend, Ethan. We hadn't talked much after everything happened. He had been there for me in the beginning, but I pushed him away. Asterisk, hey man, you good? Let's grab a drink sometime soon. Asterisk. I smiled as I typed a reply. Asterisk, yeah, let's do it. I think I'm ready. Asterisk. It was a small step, but it was a step. A step towards moving on. A step towards healing. A few months later, I was sitting at a coffee shop, reading a book, when I saw Sarah walking down the street. For a moment, I froze. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized her face. It had been months since I last saw her, and I wasn't sure what to expect when I ran into her again. She spotted me at the same time, her eyes locking with mine. She paused for a second, then slowly walked toward me. I stood up, and she stopped just a few feet away. We didn't say anything at first. We just stood there, looking at each other. The silence between us was different now. There was no anger, no pain, just acceptance. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, she said quietly, her voice soft. I nodded, the words coming easier now. I didn't think I'd see you either. She looked down at the ground, her expression filled with regret. I've been working on myself. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I've changed. I realize what I lost. I looked at her, really looked at her. She didn't look the same as she did all those months ago. She looked tired, worn out, like someone who had been through their own kind of hell. I know you've changed, I said, but I'm not sure I can ever go back to what we had. I can't forget what you did. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to make me feel guilty. She just nodded, understanding. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy. I know, Sarah. I know. We stood there for a few more moments, and then she slowly turned and walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I didn't need to seek revenge anymore. I didn't need to make her pay for what she did. What I needed was to let go. Let go of the anger. Let go of the pain. Let go of the person I used to be. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving on. And that's exactly what I was doing. If you've ever had to let go of something or someone to move forward, hit that subscribe button and stick around for more stories that explore healing, growth, and finding peace after betrayal.